Okay, I'm just going to give you a little review video before you work on the text shadow assignment because we seem to squish it in right at the end of the notes last week. So reminding you that when we do a text shadow, what we're doing is we're giving up to four different parameters. We're specifying a horizontal shadow and a vertical shadow and a blur. And then the fourth thing that we indicate is the color. And you are always welcome to set your values to 0 if you want to avoid one of the parameters, whether it's vertical, horizontal, or if you're just trying to eliminate a blur. So what I have here is a sample file that I made. And I just did an internal style sheet to make it a little bit easier to display on the screen. First of all, I guess I'm going to skip down to my HTML tags, and it's really just dealing with two H tags right here. I have an H1 and I have an H2. Up in my CSS, I have the H1 selector right here, and then here are my CSS styles inside the declaration, or the style inside the declaration block. So I have my font size set to 8M, and I'm doing that just for example's sake so that it's a little easier to see the effects on the screen. I have my text color set to blue, and then I have my text shadow. So my text shadow, I have 5px, 5px, 15px, and pink. The first one, this represents the horizontal shadow. The second number represents the vertical shadow, and the third one represents the blur, the radius of the blur, which will extend beyond the text itself, obviously, with a value of 15 pixels. And I also have that color set to be pink. Now, my H2 tag, I have my font size set to 5M, so I have it set larger, but not as large as the H1 tag. I have my font color set to green. And in this case, I'm doing a triple shadow. And as I mentioned in the notes last week, we can take text shadows and apply multiple ones. All we need to do is separate the parameters by a comma. So I have text shadow, and I have my initial shadow, 5 pixels all around, horizontal, vertical, and a blur, and I have the shadow set to blue. I have a comma, and then you'll see I have a second set of values listed. So in this time, I've extended my shadow to 10 pixels from the text, and the blur also 10 pixels, and that color is set to yellow. And I do have a third set, 15 pixels all around for vertical, horizontal, and the blur, and my color set to orange. So I am going to pull that up in the browser and let you see what it looks like. And again, I'm not the craftiest, most artistic web designer in the world, but you can see my top one here where it says see this text shadow. You do see that color of my text, the initial color is blue, and then you can see that blur behind it, and that's what the 5 pixel one would represent. The bottom one where you see the H2 tag, see this text shadow, you can see the different layers of the shadowing, although there is a blend between the yellow and the orange. You can, like I said before, set the values to 0. So if I go back and I take my H2 tag, and instead of doing a vertical blur, I set all those values to 0. You can do that. And then if I go back to my browser and I reload the page, take a look at how that bottom one has changed. And you can see now it's just a horizontal blur. And you can obviously extend, so if I want my blur of my top one, instead of being 15 pixels, if I want to do a 30 pixel blur, reload my page, take a look at my H1 at the top, and you can see how it gets a little more, I'll say dissipated, I guess, or distributed. And I can do the same thing with my one at the bottom if I want to. So instead of going with a 5 pixel blur on the first one, maybe I want to extend that to a 10. Maybe I want to extend my yellow one to a 30. Maybe I want to extend my orange to a 50 pixel. Reload my page and you can see what that does. So there are all kinds of things that you can do when you're adding a text shadow. And your job today is to take the 6 different heading sizes, H1 to H6, and apply a different text shadow to it. And experiment, try some different things out. I do recommend that you change your font size like I did to make it large so it's a little more visible, because when you're working with a smaller size, sometimes it's not quite so easy to see. The other thing I'm going to recommend, if you're interested in, and I'm going to post these on Google Classroom, but there are a lot of resources online where you can find some really cool text shadows, and you can just copy and paste it into your CSS. The only thing I'm going to warn you about with this is it does include some things that we haven't covered yet. For example, when it comes to color in our text, we talked about RGB. A lot of these have something that's called RGBA that allows us to apply transparency, and it's something that we're going to get into at a later date. So if it's something you're not familiar with and you don't want to mess with it, that's fine. If you choose to either use my links that I'll provide for you or find your own links to cool CSS text shadows, please make sure that you just change something about them, maybe the color, just so it individualizes it a little bit. But on this one link, designshack.net, when I scroll through it, it'll show you just some basic shadows, some that are a little more sophisticated, and you're capable of doing this in yours as well. This one's a really cool one that I'm showing on the screen, but it does get into that transparency issue with what we call RGBA, and then it looks like it's embossed or engraved into the web page. Engraved. So there are some of those. And another link that I'm going to give you is this one. Now this one is, obviously the graphics don't go along with the text, so the effect that you see might show up differently on your page. It's also going to specify some fonts that perhaps you don't have, but you could substitute a different font. And these ones are pretty cool. You can get like a neon effect like we have here, this one. So you're welcome to experiment with those if you want to, or if you just want to do them all on your own, that's fine too. And let me know if you have any questions, and I'm going to let you get to work.